So, hello everyone. So my name is Andrew Krajewski, and I'm a new criminology faculty member in EPS, or I guess more formally, the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences. I'm a recent graduate of the Sociology and Criminology department at Penn State University. And it's sort of funny being back in Dallas or the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because it's sort of my hometown. So I moved here in 3rd grade from St. Louis, Missouri, and I stayed here until I graduated from high school, and then I moved to Florida and then Pennsylvania. And so it's just kind of interesting being back here. So my research interests are pretty much all revolving around how do opportunities for crime actually escalate into real criminal incidents. So for example, what are the factors that escalate a minor disagreement or a minor beef into a verbal conflict, and then into a physical conflict, perhaps? Or are there some factors that make something go from a minor beef into a full-on brawl? Right. And so in exploring these issues, I tend to rely more on social psychological explanations. So how do people perceive their environment? How do they perceive the behaviors of others? Is there any alcohol involved and that's affecting decision-making? Or are there any bystanders around? Okay, so in a recent project, we use verbal and violent dispute data to examine how social norms affect the inhibition of aggression. And so we focus mostly on gender. And so what we find is that when a man is fighting a woman, they tend to engage in less aggression overall. But when you actually separate it out into verbal and physical, that inhibition is actually only seen for physical aggression. They're just as likely to insult them, threaten them with nonviolence. And so even when they do attack, or even when they do physically hurt them, they actually, there's evidence that they're less likely to cause injury. So there's some evidence that they're holding back in some way. And so in a separate project kind of extending this, I'm currently looking at the things that kind of interfere with this inhibition, right? Because we do know that there are many instances where men do hurt women. So where do these social norms break down? And so looking to the future, what I really want to explore, because in thinking about these projects, is considering the decision-making points or the circumstances that led the person to even be faced with harming someone, or to even lead to the disagreement in the first place. So I guess pulling from a classic self-control study, it's like examining not only the factors that encourage you to eat the marshmallow, it's actually what caused you to have a marshmallow in front of you in the first place. And so even more so, going back to crime, there's some evidence that some groups are more likely to have guns used against them. So the first thing that pops into my head really is, are the perpetrators behaving differently? So are they more likely to use guns, or are they just coming to the situation in a different way? Are they more likely to be carrying guns when they interact with them? And so this is important for policy because we have to think about, does this require a situational intervention or an intervention moments before? And so over the next several years, I'd really like to explore these two dimensions: behavior in situations and the decisions that led to those situations to begin with. I've somewhat started this. So I've begun to consider how social networks structure opportunity structures, but I'm also interested in applying and integrating more common social psychological methodologies. So for example, one thing that's really interesting to me right now is using kind of the childhood paradigm of create your own adventures or choose your own adventures to study like sequential decision making, or doing intensive data collections from things like developmental psychologists to study a few days with intense detail collection or deep data collection, so that we can study, what were the factors that immediately preceded conflict. So because of this, I really anticipate working mostly with social and developmental psychologists, but I'm still very much open to other ideas, and I really just enjoy talking about these issues. So thinking back to the beginning of kind of this little segment, we talked about how I ended up in Dallas, and it seems kind of surprising in some ways. And so to study this, we could look at my decision to come here. But we should also, in my opinion, study all the little decision-making points that led to me coming. Thank you.